Hello, welcome. I have to be honest with you, I am so warm right now. I'm gonna take this off. Today, I just want to do a bit of a cozy reading check-in. It's October, we're finally getting into the cozy fall vibes. I just have been missing talking about books. So this video is going to be sort of all-encompassing, a little bit of telling you about some books that I have read recently, as well as books that I really want to read and reread this fall. You know how it goes with me, I am not the best at giving details or summarizing the plots or synopsis of books. Most of my reviews are sort of just based on vibes and how I felt at the time of reading. So if you're here to get a in-depth idea of what the book is about, that's not exactly what I'm here to do. I just want to give a disclaimer because I know some people really like to know more details about the books, and I'm just not great at giving those. I have some tea. I'm excited about it. Yeah, so first I thought I would talk about some of the books that I'm reading right now. So currently, I'm working my way through a couple of books, a couple big books, and then I have one book that I just started today. I'm reading it on my Kindle, but that book is Monstrelio. So far, I'm only like 27 pages in, but I'm really, really loving it, and I can tell why everyone I've talked to is really obsessed with this book. It's kind of like a literary fiction meets horror about a woman whose son has died, and she saves a piece of his lung, and presumably things start to happen. I love kind of gross literary horror, so this seems like it will definitely be the book for me. I'm very excited to continue reading it. I'm also in the middle of Les Mis by Victor Hugo. I finally started it, and you might be thinking to yourself, isn't that a different copy of Les Mis than the one I've been holding up for the last 4 videos? Yes, it is, because I started reading my other copy. Honestly, that translation was just not really working for me. That one was an older translation from the 1980s. This one is a lot more recent, and I feel like with this specific translation, you can feel the humor a lot more coming through. And I'm only on page 50, I think. I had made it about 50 pages in to the other edition I was reading, and I started from the beginning again because I didn't want to miss anything, and already this one is clicking with me a lot more. We are still talking about this bishop guy, and we have been talking about him for the entire book so far, so I'm a little excited to move on from that. But I have actually I've been liking it. It's not like I don't want to read it and don't want to pick it up, which is what I was worried it would feel like. This one also it translates some of the French phrases. Well, the other copy didn't do that, and I do not speak French at all. I'm actually very scared to pronounce the French words in this book, and I am avoiding doing it out loud because I don't want you all to make fun of me. I'm definitely not going to be finishing this before the end of the year, but I'm just really happy to be working my way through it, and I'll keep you updated because this is a fun journey for me. I'm also currently reading, where did it go? Oh, The Complete Tales of Edgar Allan Poe. I have had this book for a long time, and it's split into sections of his poetry and then his stories and short stories, and I am currently in the poetry section, and I'm liking it. I'm not the biggest poetry person. I struggle with it sometimes. So far, it's a fun time, and I feel like this is a good thing to read this time of year also. I wanted to save this for the fall, and I'm glad that I have, because Edgar Allan Poe just feels like a very fall author to be reading. I want to try to challenge myself to read like one poem a day at least until I get through them. I know once I get past the poems and to the stories, I'll be even more excited to continue to pick this up. And again, definitely not finishing this before the end of the year, but it's fun and I'm happy to be working my way through it. Yeah, I've been reading a lot of good books recently. Normally my reading definitely starts to taper off this time of year, but this year so far I've kind of been keeping it going, which has been really nice. I gotta be honest about that. I'm gonna try to go through these pretty fast because I have a lot I want to talk about. One of my favorite books I've read recently was A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. I will never forgive publishers for making covers this shiny. I'm on a mission to read everything that Ava Reid has ever written, this included. I actually didn't know that this book was a young adult book until I started reading it. It's very good. If you like dark academia, you will like this. If you like folklore and fairy tales and that kind of thing, I think you'll definitely like this. If you're a fan of creepy fae, you would also like this. I went into it knowing very little about it. I think if you're a person who doesn't typically like young adult books, you might still enjoy this. The writing style is very good. There is a specific story within the book that is referenced a lot. There is a lot of lore, this fictional world that relates to the world of this book and the world of the book in the book, which I think is really cool. I don't know if I'm explaining that right. Every chapter has a header that is either a quote from the book or somebody in a publication talking about that book. It's just very cool. I love when there's like sort of a meta within a book. It's just so good, and there are so many layers that become more clear as you're reading, and it's definitely a book that I feel like I want to go back and read again, knowing everything I know now that I have finished it. It's the perfect fall and winter book, I think. So another book I recently read was Silver Nitrate by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Have only read 2 of her books, that one included, and I love her writing style so much. Even when there are elements of her books that don't work for me entirely, I'm still just having such a good time within the story and with her writing. Silver Nitrate, it takes place in the 90s. It's about a cursed film, and so many things about that book just specifically lined up with my interests. The main female protagonist is a film editor who specifically works with sound. I went to school for film. I wanted to be involved in post-production, so that specifically just aligned so much with my interests. There's also a very large occult aspect of the book, and I'm also very interested in witchcraft and all of that fun stuff. So it just felt like there were a lot of aspects of this book that were made for me and my interests. So I really, really liked that. The way it's written and the way she describes things, I could picture it so clearly in my head. I felt like I was watching a film, and I wonder how much of that was intentional. It would translate really well into film. And I definitely don't feel that way about every book. It also, I think that it was marketed as like a horror thriller, and I would not call it that. I think that if you go into it expecting more of a occult mystery, then you will get more enjoyment out of it, because if you're expecting something really fast-paced, that it isn't super fast-paced. It's a lot more about the mystery and figuring out what is happening than it get from like horror and thrillers and stuff. So yes, but I really, really liked that a lot. And then I also recently read Diavola by Jennifer Marie Thorne, and that book I really, really loved. I gave it 4 stars. It was a horror book, and it just checked off so many things that I specifically like. I find ghosts that just sort of appear behind you and stand there to be scarier than anything. That's terrifying to me. They don't even have to do anything. If I like catch my reflection and there's someone standing behind me, I will cease to exist. I don't think that's really a spoiler. I mean, you know that there's a ghost. It's a ghost story. It's about a woman who goes on vacation with her family, and the house that they're staying in is haunted, and a lot of things start to happen. I love haunted house stories. I love ghost stories. It being vacation themed was also very fun. It takes place in Italy, and it's kind of like the ghost plus the like family vacation from hell type of thing. Last third of the book, I'd say, it dragged just a tad, but all in all, I really, really liked it. The cover is very scary. I'm scared to put it on the screen, but I'm gonna have to. Yeah, I also read the first ever short story collection where I liked every story. 50 Beasts to Break Your Heart by Jenna Rose Nethercott. I normally have a really complicated relationship with short story collections. I don't frequently find short story collections to be things that I really enjoy. I usually end up liking maybe 1 or 2 stories, and the rest I'm kind of meh on. I don't think I'd ever rated one more than 3 stars, and it's really frustrating when it's an author that you really love but you just don't vibe with their short stories as much. But I'm glad I gave this one a try, because each story was different but sort of felt this nostalgic, gothic, small town sort of vibes. Most of the stories kind of felt that way to me. There was one story that I didn't love. I think it was the last one in the collection. So throughout the whole book, it's like banger after banger after banger. And then the last one, I was like, there's just one specific thing that I typically really don't like in books. But I think from a folklore fairy tale sort of perspective, like that sort of thing is just gonna happen. I'm not gonna tell you what it is, but definitely I'd say to look up the trigger warnings with this. It's definitely got that kind of creepy folklore sort of energy, which again is something that I just really, really love. 50 Beasts to Break Your Heart. I definitely recommend it. I am really obsessed. Okay, yes. The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. This was one of my most anticipated books of this year. This was so good. If you watched any of my videos, you probably already know that I really love Robert Jackson Bennett's Founders trilogy, and I've read it a couple times now. It's just such a fun series, and I'm gonna stop talking about it because if you let me, I will just go on and on. This is the first book he's come out with since finishing that series, and it is also going to be a series, which makes me very happy. And this book is a murder mystery in a sort of urban fantasy style. I feel like it has really good neurodivergence and disability representation, which is something that I always love in books. A lot of the magic is based around plants and contagions, and I just find that to be so intriguing. Again, Robert Jackson Bennett always has the most unique magic systems out of any fantasy I read, and I love that. I love it. I'm obsessed with hardcovers that don't have jackets. Can publishers give us more of these? I'm more likely to spend $28 on a hardcover if it doesn't have a jacket. I don't want to give away too much about this book because I think it's really good to go in not knowing a ton, but I really loved it. I'm so excited to continue with this series, and this is definitely fall vibes. And then literally last night, I just finished reading We Are Okay by Nina LaCour, which I think you should read in the winter time because it's a wintry book. This book is about grief and loneliness, especially. I could have read it in a day, I think, if I had had the time to sit down and just read it cover to cover. I feel like it honestly would be really good having that kind of experience with it. It's not a book where a ton of stuff happens, but I love that kind of thing. The writing is very descriptive. This is the first thing I've read by Nina LaCour, and I absolutely want to read more from her. I love her writing style. This is contemporary also, and I haven't read a contemporary book in quite a while, at least that wasn't also horror or a mystery or something, and I want to read more. I love that kind of thing, and this is also a young adult book, but it was just amazing. I have Watch Over Me by Nina LaCour on its way to me right now because of how much I loved this one. It's hard to find a quote that like encompasses the book. Okay, let me read a little piece. I could say the night felt magical, but that would be embellishment. That would be romanticization. What it actually felt like was life. We weren't thinking of what would happen next. No one talked about the way summer was supposed to unfold or the places we'd find ourselves in the fall. It was as if we'd made a pact to be in the moment, or like being in the moment was the only way to be. It's just like, ooh, you know? It was so good, and it did not make me cry, but the whole last like 3 or 4 chapters, my eyes were like burning while reading this. This is a piece of art. This is beautiful and gorgeous and so fucking sad, but so good. That has concluded the segment of books I'm currently reading and books that I have read, and now I really want to get into some books that I want to read. Probably not going to actually get to all of these because my reading has slowed down quite a lot. Those are some of the books I read like over the last 2 months. Getting into books that I really want to reread. I've been in such a mood for rereading, and I normally don't reread a ton until the end of the year. I think part of it is just like a psychological thing. Like I've gotten a lot of my reading goals out of the way. There's not really as many new releases that I'm thinking about. I just found myself in a place where I want to revisit stories that I love. The first one that I want to talk about, I really want to reread My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. I read this a couple summers ago and I loved it. This is a book about a girl named Jade who is obsessed with slashers, and she believes a slasher story is about to happen in her hometown. Part of the reason why I want to reread it is because I have the sequel now, and I really would like to read the sequel. I know that the third one just came out earlier this year, I think, and I know I'll get to it eventually. Probably next year. The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. I have loved everything that I've read from Alexis Henderson. If you want a book that takes place during the witch trials, or like Puritan vibes, I guess, this book is really good. Trigger warnings, of course. Honestly, just always check the trigger warnings. Take care of yourself. Another book that I really want to reread is The Halloween Tree. So freaking shiny! I will never forgive publishers for making covers this shiny. I read this for the first time last year. When I read it, I was like, this could be a yearly tradition for me. The only way to make it a tradition is to keep doing it, so I might as well, right? This is a book about a bunch of kids who gather on Halloween night, and one of them is whisked away. The book sort of follows all of them as they are transported through different time periods, learning about the history of Halloween. It was just a fun little romp. Like, is it the most historically accurate? I don't think so, but it is written really well, and I enjoyed the Halloween vibes with this one. I also really want to reread Starling House before the end of the year by Alex E. Harrow. I loved this book so much when I read it last year. Any book where the house is like a character or plays a large part in the story is my kind of thing. I freaking love house books. Another book where the main character is obsessed with a book or story that exists in this world. I'm starting to see a theme. I think I just really love that kind of thing. If you also love that kind of thing, this is definitely a good book for you. Something about this type of gothic fantasy, just like, I want to absorb it into my soul. As soon as I read this, I was like, this is a part of me now, and I am never letting go of it. Another house book, In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. I can't believe it hasn't even been a year since I read this, because ever since I put it down, I've been wanting to pick it back up. It's so good, it's so descriptive. I've talked about it so many times, you don't need to hear me talk about it again, but the way it's formatted and the way the story is told is so intriguing. I want to reread it and underline and put tabs in, and hopefully I will. Let me tell you about The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I read this book in 2019 or 2020, and it got me out of the reading slump that I had been in for the entire time that I was in college. This book is translated from Spanish by Lucia Graves. This is the book that is the reason why I read so much as I do now, and I feel like I owe it all to this book. Love the writing. It's beautiful, it's lyrical. This book is disturbing and scary at times and just like heartbreaking and wonderful. I love it. And again, I'm reading the back and realizing that this book is about a book. So clearly there's a theme for me. This book is the first book in the series, The Cemetery of Forgotten Books. One thing that I really love about this series, which I have not read any other books, but the author said that he specifically wants everybody to read the books in this series in whatever order they want. You can read whichever one seems the most interesting to you, and because of that you can have a unique experience with the order that you decide to read the books in. This is the first one I read. I have the fourth one because that's the next one that I found, and so I'm really excited because I love when you can kind of like customize stuff like that. I want to read the first one and then the fourth one and have it be fine. I know that this book is really popular. I don't think it's like an obscure book by any means, and yet I've never met anyone else who has read it. And I want to talk to people about it. Next is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I want to reread this book so bad. My book definitely has the most 2011 cover that I've ever seen. This book was my favorite classic for a really long time. I read it in high school and I loved it so much. I have only read it once since then. I just remember this being absolutely mesmerizing to my little 16-year-old brain. I'm hoping that it will be equally mesmerizing to my 27-year-old brain. So there you have it, Wuthering Heights. I don't think you need me to tell you what this is about. Next up is not a gothic book. That would be Lonely Castle in the Mirror by Mizuki Sujimura. This is translated from Japanese by Philip Gabriel. This book destroyed me when I read it about 2 years ago now. I'm just going to tell you what it says. In a tranquil neighborhood of Tokyo, 7 teenagers wake to find their bedroom mirrors are shining. At a single touch, they are pulled from their lonely lives to a wondrous castle filled with winding stairways, watchful portraits, and twinkling chandeliers. They are confronted with a set of clues leading to a hidden room where one of them will be granted a wish. But there's a catch. As time passes, they begin to realize only those brave enough to share their stories will be saved. This book had me legitimately bawling my eyes out for multiple hours and was so good that it put me in like a 2-month-long reading slump. Is this my favorite book? If you like translated fiction and you haven't read this, I highly recommend it if you're okay with crying a lot. I'm saying that as an endorsement. Last book on my list of books that I really want to reread, and one that I'm like, in my heart of hearts, I know I'm not going to get to it this year, and that is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Those of you who don't know me super well probably don't know this, unless I just give off those vibes, which I kind of hope that I do, honestly. I am such a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I love the Lord of the Rings. I love The Hobbit. The Hobbit movies, I have a complicated feelings about, but we're not here to talk about that right now. This book is like a piece of who I am, and it's been a really, really long time since I've read it. I'm absolutely overdue for giving it a reread. I just feel like this is a flawless masterpiece, and I need to read it as soon as I possibly can. Is that gonna stop me from putting it off for probably like another 3 months at least? No. But I need to talk about it because I love it and I really want to reread it. Yes. Okay. Moving on to books that I have not yet read and thus do not really know very much about what they're about. So this will go a lot faster. Number one is I really want to read the third book from the Wayfarers trilogy, Record of a Spaceborne Few by Becky Chambers. I bought this book yesterday. And she's gorgeous. The other two, I just loved both of them, so I don't imagine I will feel any differently about this one. The first one especially kind of has like Doctor Who mixed with Star Trek, mixed with just its own separate thing kind of vibes. I love that. Next up is Lady Macbeth by Ava Reid. Again, I'm on my mission to read everything Ava Reid has ever written, and this is her most recent release. I need to show you the end pages real quick. Look at that shit. I feel like if I don't finish it before the end of the year, this would be a really good January book. Another one is Thistlefoot by Jenna Rose Nethercott. I don't know anything about this at all. I just know that it's by Jenna Rose Nethercott, who wrote 50 Beasts to Break Your Heart, and it was on sale and I bought it and I can't wait to read it. There's a tab in this. I love buying used books and finding little remnants of the lives of whoever read them before me. It's so floppy too. The next book I really, really, really want to read is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. I got this for Christmas 2 years ago and I can't believe I haven't read it yet. I still am a little bit sad that they changed the cover from the independently published one and you can't buy it unless you get it on eBay or Pango Books for like $300 because resellers are unhinged. But it's got deckled edges, first of all. Which I love. I believe that this is the tale of Constanta, who is the first bride of Dracula, and I believe that this is a sapphic story also. At least I definitely hope that it is. I love vampires and women, and I am excited to read this. Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. Laini Taylor's Daughter of Smoke and Bone series remains one of my all-time favorite young adult series that I read when I was in high school, and I know I need to give it a reread. In fact, you can see it right there on my shelf. But I've never read Strange the Dreamer, and I know a lot of people think that this is her best. I don't know a single thing about it. I know it's part of a duology, which is cool because commitment to long series scares me a little bit. So knowing that it's a duology makes me very happy, and it also has a moth on the front, and I love moths. And finally, the last book is The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. This is one of those books that there are so many retellings of it. The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware is based off of this book, and I'm sure there are others. But it's one of those ones where I want to read the original story before I read retellings of it. Even though I think I have actually read that Ruth Ware book, but whatever. It's another classic. Fall is just the time for classics, in my opinion. Yes, thanks for hanging out with me while I talk about books. I love doing this. I'm hoping to do it more. I say that every time. But thank you for being here and making it this far into the video. Let me know if there's any books you've been reading recently that you really love and anything that you are super looking forward to reading during the rest of the year. If you feel inclined to like and subscribe if you want to, that'd be awesome. If you don't want to, that's also fine. Cool. Hopefully I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching and goodbye. How do I stop this? Oh.